I'm just a bit concerned because he hasn't scored in a sort of a competitive game since March 17th, since the 4-3.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a long time for for Rashford.
Jay here for Stretford Paddock. This is Off the Bar, brought to you by Green King Sport. You're right. I felt right. The little sort of, the excited sort of moment there from Joe Smith, because we've got a special guest today with us. It's Jamie Jackson from The Guardian, and I say this, with all due respect, an old friend of the channel.
Definitely, of course.
I always say this. I think you were the first journalist that came on the channel as it was Full-Time Devils, and
yes.
We were talking off camera. You are sort of the talk of the town at the minute. You've done an article on Erik Ten Hag and his future, which we're going to be sort of dissecting with you, getting a little bit of background on that, and just getting your take on how you think things are faring for Manchester United under the manager this season.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like deja vu all over again, doesn't it, John?
We're back here. We're back where we thought we wouldn't be. I mean, let's just get into this article then. Obviously, it's come out this morning and you're talking about how Ten Hag's game model must improve or needs to be improved. And I don't want to rephrase it to a way that it's not true, but essentially that the people above Ten Hag at Manchester United aren't happy with how things are going.
I mean, you've lost 2 and 1.
Yep.
I think if you'd lost those 2 and 1 playing in a way which wasn't sort of open or vulnerable, sort of midfield and defence, kind of reminiscent of the last 2 years, really, when United are at the worst, then I don't think this would be where we've reached the position that sort of he's in, Ten Hag. It's interesting because he's had all summer to sort of address this. You could sort of say he's had 2 years, and he does bristle a bit when asked about the mode of play. And his response, which is a fair enough response, is we've won 2 trophies, but we all know the league is kind of United's, where United really want to win. And so I think. After they come back from the international break, United, in about 6 weeks, I think you've got 10 games, right? And that's all competitions that are up and running, Europe, the Carabao Cup and the league. I'm not saying that is the defining number of games or phase, but it just has to improve things. Just show them, and this is the football department, obviously, that United is starting to look like the real deal. Because I actually did a story on tour towards the start of the tour, which was I was told, look, United have to finish in the top 4. We would love United to, of course, as high as possible. But if we, meaning United, don't finish in the top 4, but wow, this team looks proper now. 2 or 3 more signings and can really then that'd be sort of okay. Ten Hag wouldn't lose his job, and I think that's a reasonable position, because I think that's what that says to me, and hopefully you two and the viewers is The heads are screwed on. It's about they understand they're not going to win the title this season, but let's see some progress. So that's why this is alarmed, I think, these opening 3 games, because what's been going on all summer, sort of thing. Now, mitigation is again injuries, because this is what I'm told. There's a recognition that you've got Yoro injured, who I know he's an 18-year-old kid, but and I know it's very difficult to judge basically 2 halves. Well, it was a half and then. The time of the Arsenal game on tour before he got injured, but he looked really good. He's injured. Højlund's out, and Ugarte's not playing any domestic football. He's yet to play for you. He still needs some time. So there's a recognition of all that. It's not like he's going to go next week or anything like that. But but there is a sense that once all those factors are resolved, the injuries, players integrated, and sort of, now let's see what you've got. Otherwise, it's probably will be good night Vienna.
Yeah,
it is quite rare that, isn't it, for a Manchester United manager to be afforded that. If you don't make Champions League, you can still be okay. Because every United manager post-Fergie, it's the Champions League position that's done for him. Because when it became mathematically impossible for Moyes, he got sacked almost immediately.
Yes.
Jose had got himself, Louis van Gaal won the FA Cup, finished 6th, not good enough, no Champions League.
Got sacked the next day.
Sacked the next day. Jose got sacked when we were looking like top 4 was going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
And ditto Ollie, I think you could argue. And obviously Ralph Rangnick was a caretaker. But so to have that sort of level of backing is 100%.
He's already finished outside the top 4 last season as well.
I've got to be honest. I was quite surprised when I was told that. And as a journalist who's been going on 20 odd years, you can only trust your sources. And I did this story on when I mentioned on tour about basically what we're talking about. He doesn't have to finish in top 4. Of course I did it because I really trusted where the information come from, but you're still thinking crumbs. That's actually quite interesting, that, because of what you just said then, Joe. I mean, they finished 8th.
I almost forgot that. I almost forgot
it's already happened.
He's already done it once.
Just on this article from today, then obviously we'll go through loads of different things, but you mention in there that Ten Hag's job is at risk if the game model doesn't improve.
Yeah.
Now, for myself and for others, that's a phrase that I'm not hugely aware of. Obviously, I can envisage what it means, I can imagine the word, but what, to your understanding, is the game model? What is a game model? What does that mean?
I think they want United to control games, dominate opponents. Now, what does that mean, or how does that happen? It usually means you get hold of the ball and knock it around a bit and shift the opposition away. It's not really playing on the counter-attack or sort of off the cuff. Now, I thought United did very well to beat City in the FA Cup final, right? I thought it was a very good performance. City, but I didn't think it was an amazingly controlled performance. Haaland hit the post, so I know anyone can do that, but the goal you scored to win was a really good goal, but it was a classic Ten Hag goal. It was basically a counter-attack, wasn't it, if you remember? You know the goal I mean. Rashford hits it over to the right.
I've watched it.
Yeah, sure.
I've watched it.
Listen, I'm not trying to, I sort of try to downplay that goal or the win, but what I'm trying to say is that is classic Ten Hag play, and I think that is what they're concerned about, because it's okay if it works, but what happens, what's a plan B, or sort of how do you sort of adjust for different oppositions? Now, this Casemiro 2 mistakes, they still, it gives the ball away, but this doesn't necessarily mean there has to be a goal from that. So I don't really think it's just down to the Casemiro, right? I mean, it wasn't a great pass, and United got killed by Liverpool in that, but where was the sort of the other midfielder, for example, or where was the cover? And it's just that sort of vulnerability, that openness, that the winner for Brighton at Brighton, I think there's 2 or 3 players queuing up on the far post, right, to put it in. What's that about? But to a certain extent, how is that attacking position even got that far advanced? If you understand what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So this Ugarte thing is interesting, because people are saying, oh, he's no Rodri, he's no sort of like controlling number 6. I don't think that's necessarily what you need. I think Mainu is your sort of playmaker. He's your sort of. But what you need is kind of what Casemiro was at his very best, and maybe still can get back to that, which is just a sort of someone who can snuff danger out, and and so I think this is why, and I think it's really, really intelligent, this fact that there is still a recognition that he needs more time to, it's not fair basically to judge Ten Hag until these players. Listen, you're not going to always have everyone fit, every single player, but you know what I mean. The key ones are back fit, and the ones you brought in are sort of had time to bed in, and Ugarte's up to speed. So that's basically the position that it's at. But I just think there is a bit of an alarm there, and let's be clear. Whether they prove to be winners or not at United, I don't think the Ineos football-led department, which obviously controlled by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, they're not here to sort of mess around. No. Right? They're here to win. So they're going to be sort of, people might call it ruthless. I don't necessarily think it's ruthless. I just think it's sort of realistic. Any manager, especially after you've had last season, where I think we all agree that the actual performances weren't great. I know the results weren't either, but the manner,
they was just
weren't great.
It was terrible a lot of the time. They were.
So I mean, I don't know what you two think. We sort of discussing this off camera with Joe a little bit before, but I still have seen signs. Even Liverpool was obviously a massive example, but I even thought the second half against Fulham, United fell back into how they had been under Ten Hag last season, where there wasn't much pattern of play, not much control, not much like, well, not only are we, and I know it's drawing at the time, but not only are we going to beat this lot, but we're going to beat them quite handsomely. They haven't got a chance, because I think there are some games where United should be able to do that, right? Where it's like it's always a little bit dicey.
We never put teams away. We're never out of sight. We're never 3 goals up after 50 minutes.
There's no solidity to your team. There's no sort of like,
With all those different things you mentioned, then is it all those different aspects that the club are looking at, or is there a specific, because it's like, patterns of play defensively?
Well, I think they're all kind of part of the same thing. So I think they're all the same thing, which is a sort of a mode of play which is very, very difficult to score against, and opponents find very, very difficult to stop, being scored against as well. I mean, I know. You shouldn't really mention City, but the way in which they're, you kind of know what you're getting with City. When United were brilliant, you knew more or less what would happen, right? You just did. And I don't think that. I think it's just more this lack of solidity in midfield and defence, and sort of so there's a lot of space here, and it's happening again and again. And I go back to it. Casemiro giving away that pass, was it for the first one?
Yeah,
I don't think that should not necessarily lead to a goal, right? But he kind of knew it was going to, and that's because where's the cover?
Yeah,
it's interesting. I don't know, and I don't know whether. Because I know other teams do push their fullbacks up high, and you kind of expose yourself, and you rely on that player to be incredibly well disciplined. Your number 6, your Casemiro, has to be on it almost all the time. But I don't know whether we are particularly risky, or whether Casemiro is particularly sort of mistake prone. I'm not entirely sure, and I would love to see what Ten Hag thinks of that. And obviously the fact that he's brought Ugarte in suggests that he thinks that replacing Casemiro could help things.
Yeah, a lot, and I think this is why, as my sort of story said earlier today, they want to see what the team is like when everyone who's sort of first choice is fit. A few games, okay, because he might make a massive difference. Yeah. Yoro, if he's playing, again, I have to say this, it's very difficult to judge. He's an 18-year-old kid, but maybe he snuffs out that danger for Casemiro because he is so fast and he is so good. Yeah. This is the whole point about getting better players, isn't it? Suddenly it's like the team. Oh, wait a minute. This way that he's playing actually works because they are more solid, because the players are in place.
Yeah. I was watching a compilation earlier, and I know it's completely different, but it was a compilation of Paul Scholes. It was like a 34-year-old Paul Scholes. It was a game against Newcastle, and it's a compilation that does the rounds on Twitter quite a lot. But you just look at what he's doing, and the pass and little sidestep the other side of a man, receives it again, first time out to the left wing, gets it, turns away from his man, dummies one way, goes back against him, and then pings it out to the right. I mean, you think that's not a tactical thing, and tactics were different then as well. This is 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
So football was different generally, but the quality that he's displaying on the ball, his innate ability to find space for himself, find his men in space, is unlike anything we've got at Man United.
Yeah.
I'm not saying if we don't have Paul Scholes we can't win, but there is a definite thing of like, sometimes you need really good players to do certain systems, and maybe Ten Hag's too reliant on good players, and that could be an issue. But I do think that you just look at the men on the pitch. If we had Salah for us, and they had, I don't want to, it's not particularly dig at Garnacho or Rashford, but swap them for one of our wingers, we probably don't lose that game 3-0. In fact, we might well win that game. So it's like, I'm not saying if you haven't got world class players in every position you can't win. But it would be helpful if any of our front line were in form.
Definitely.
And if Casemiro wasn't 32 and maybe playing a system he's not used to, and if we had a left back, like, these things do change results.
Of course they do.
I know you.
And I think that's why, again, they want to give it time. Because, you mentioned left back. It's such a shame about Luke Shaw, because Luke Shaw has an amazing ability to be out really injured and, for a long time, sadly, and then come back in and he just looks absolutely mint again because he's so good. I just think he's just a classy player. That's just one position that you're always missing, And I think, again, this is why it is very difficult to judge it. We're discussing it now, and I think that's the Ineos people's issue. Difficult to judge, and I think that's why he kept his job, because they looked at it all. And I thought it was actually brave not to sack him. I thought it was the right decision, because it would have been easier to do what not necessarily us three or everyone, but a lot of people say, "Well, what's going on here with him? Yeah, okay, you won the FA Cup, but are you having a laugh?" They actually thought about it. So now, given all that, that's why they still want. Listen, I haven't been told this, but I would be staggered if they did not sit down and say, look, if we back this guy and keep him and get him 4 or 5 signings, who's been brought in, and it goes like pear-shaped, first 2 or 3 games, what we're going to do? If we do, right, okay, we're going to. Of course we are, because what's the point of going through all? And that's what we're seeing now. But it's just this mode of play, and it's sort of chicken egg to a certain extent, because your mode of play. It's kind of dependent on the players. You sort of say you haven't got a Salah, for example, but to a certain extent, that is the manager's job. Guardiola always says it's not about how I want to play; it's the players I have and what's the best way. They sort of changed it a little bit with Haaland. Ten Hag. I think he's a smart cookie. I think nothing that. Again, I haven't been told this, but Jason Wilcox is the technical director, so he's in charge, or his overarching thing. One of the main things is the model of play for the first team, right? So I'd be staggered if there's not conversations going on. That's his job basically. Again, I haven't been told that, but this international break with Ten Hag, with the coaching staff, what do you think? Maybe it's just a tweak here and there. And I'm guessing if Ten Hag is the sort of intelligent operator that I've so far found him to be, that he will be open to that. But also, don't get me wrong, a manager cannot sit there, as in Ten Hag's case, and say, I don't fancy Casemiro, of course I don't, or, I didn't want Sancho at the time. He's bound a little, and that's why I actually suggested in a sort of like feature ahead of the season, maybe sometimes, and they have done it actually with Berardi and Ashworth, maybe sometimes they should send other people out to talk, not necessarily for the, just to take the weight off the manager, because it's a heck of a lot, and I think this is what this new structure is about. And again, I go back to it, this is why there is going to be some patience, because they understand, they want to give him the best chance, you know.
As always, Off the Bar is sponsored by Green King Sport, where football is more than a game. The season is well underway, and if you haven't got match tickets, why not do the next best thing? Get together with your mates and go down and catch the action at your local Green King Sport pub.
And the best thing is, if you use the Green King Sport app, you get 10% off all of your drinks during the game. And if you haven't downloaded the app yet, you also get a free pint when you do. We've put a link to the app in the description. Go and check it out. Click on that link, and thank you once again to Green King Sport.
You say that patience, and you mentioned there about injured players like Lenny Yoro. How long's he out for? He's out for a little while.
Yeah, 3 months.
3 months,
maybe more,
maybe longer. We don't know Mason Mount. I think was it 6 weeks or whatever, maybe a bit longer than that. Do you see them waiting that long then for these players? Because some of these players, like, I know it's a cliche, but it's a long time.
Well, that's kind of why I quoted you the 10 games. That's a 6-week period, right, where I think most of them, including hopefully Yoro, I think he's got a chance, will be back. Already, I hate to say this, but I think you've got 6 injuries, which is like an 11th of last season's 66. So already, you're 3 games into the season, you're nearly a 10th of what you had last year, which was considered a disaster, which it was.
Basically moving at the same rate. If a season's about 10 months long, and we're a 10th of the way through our injury quote from last year, we're already on course.
I think Arsenal game.
Well, we were all there. I was just going to say, I could not believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe, especially after he said the day before, Ten Hag, that it may well happen again, and it's the survival of the fittest sort of thing, whatever his phrase was. But he obviously wasn't expecting it to happen 24 hours later in the first. So, it is reported, and I think it's probably correct, that they understood there might be an issue with Yoro and his foot.
Yeah.
Again, is that Ten Hag's fault? I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who's signing that one off? That sounds a little bit reminiscent of previous.
Yeah. If they're looking long term, and you go, he's an 18-year-old, and at some point his foot might go, and we're going to lose him for 4 months. Over the course of his United career, we can stomach that. But for it to happen in pre-season, and now we've got to wait till just this side of Christmas for him to come back. You mentioned before about sharing the sort of PR load of a little bit of Ten Hag, and taking some of the weight off his shoulders across all parts of the club. That is something Ineos have said a lot publicly. Obviously, there was then this interview that came out after the Liverpool game, but it was conducted before the Liverpool game with Dan Ashworth and Omar Berardi. Yeah. You were there for that interview, and presumably the way it was written, no one was writing as an exclusive. I guess it was a group of you who were all there together. Firstly, just on this, before we get into the content of that interview, why was it the case that it was filmed before arguably the biggest game of the football season and released afterwards, when we got 7-0'd by these lot 2 years ago? I know he's had a decent record against Liverpool other than that, but do you think it was almost tactical of like, if we lose, this will be a great backing of him, and if we win, this will really reinforce how good we are? Or do you think it was a little bit silly recording it and releasing it either side of such a big game?
This is a very interesting question, and one that, let's say, was debated also, among people who were there. I'm not too sure, really.
It's an odd one, though.
Yeah, it was a little bit. You'd have to ask the club that, and of course, it's very good of them to put basically, the two most powerful executives there, right? Because the chief executive and the sporting director, Ashworth, who's in charge of not just football, but for the men's, but sort of the whole, women's and the whole thing, youth, blah 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 blah. Yes, I think you're probably right, Joe. I think what you just said then, if we do happen to lose, well, we know, Omar and Berardi and Dan Ashworth are going to be asked about Ten Hag. So they're obviously going to voice their support. So yeah, that's then going to come out, as supportive. And then I mean, I think that I don't know this for sure, but I think also they feel they've had he basically said it actually, Ashworth. They feel like they had a really good transfer window, so I think maybe they wanted to sort of like, and it's fair enough, sort of talk about that a bit. But of course, the transfer window was good in terms of numbers, but you don't know till the end of the season, right? How good these players are. I mean, So anyway, but yeah, it was interesting timing.
Yeah. Who do you think sort of the decision lies with? Is it everyone? Because in terms of Ten Hag, with regard to Ten Hag, is it Barada? Because back in the day, it would have been Woodward, I think. Ultimately, maybe.
Well, Woodward and Joe Glazer. Yeah.
What's the situation now?
I think it probably
all of them, or
well, I mean, Dan Ashworth is basically kind of what Woodward was in that he is the one who sort of, is responsible. I happened to ask Ashworth on Sunday ahead of the Liverpool game. Are you not a bit of a hostage to the fortune of Ten Hag because he was appointed before you came in, and I know you're not just the first team, but you'll be rated kind of. I'm paraphrasing what I said, but you'll be rated kind of on how good the manager is. And he sort of said, well, I wasn't here, but I'm very happy with him. Now, of course, I think they just listen. They want United to win, and they want so therefore they're not going to waste all this time. They're not going to speak to people like us if they didn't really feel that they want Ten Hag to succeed. Of course, I get that, but to a certain extent, just like all of them in that room, just like everyone at that club, apart from like the actual owners, everyone's expendable.
Yeah,
they just are. I mean, it's just a business to a certain extent. If you want to go down that route, so they want Ten Hag to do well, but at the same time, I'll put it a different way. Let's say I'm not saying this is going to happen. Let's say after that run of 10 games, in the 6 weeks after you come back, I don't know. It's basically the same. Let's say it's still the same sort of performances. You're very open. What would you two then be thinking? Because you're then basically in early October or whatever it is, and you think, well, it'd be mid-October actually. You're fans, you love the club. What would you? And I know you want the best for Ten Hag, but I mean, there has to come a time surely when, however much you like a guy, and how much patience you've got to think. Well, you've had a fair crack. I don't know whether it would be then for you.
It's a fair question actually, because me and you have done this going back to Jose. I think the first time I spoke to you about the manager's future was Jose Mourinho's time, and you were saying like any United manager almost 3 defeats away from the start. And I remember with each manager there was a point where I got to. It's almost one game. There's a defining game where you go, like with Jose Sevilla.
Yes.
Was my first one where I thought, I don't think this guy's gonna work out this. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I know it sounds like I'm saying it because it happened, but the Liverpool game, which was his last game, I was done with it. Yeah. When he started, and especially the way he did that game when I think he took, was it Delo off for Fellaini or whatever, when they were having loads of joy down. It like he was sabotaging the team to me. It felt like he was trying to make a statement. I remember thinking, I'm done. Ole, there was a few games, but obviously the Liverpool loss at home. Again, I love Ole, but I remember thinking this doesn't have a happy ending.
Because sometimes it's not about whether you can still like the manager and think like you try to, I appreciate you really tried your hardest, probably all that, but there's still like a decision beyond that, which is like about cold logic, right? Like as you say, it's just not going to work out. You
get to that point where you look at it and you go, even the Everton draw, I think, was it the Everton draw with Ole? I thought, oh, this doesn't feel with Ronnie being unhappy and Fergie saying what he'd said, and you thought this doesn't end well. And I think I'm not there yet, but it could end up,
I think as well
there could be one game where you go, no, this isn't. I don't ever think I've got to the point where I really dislike a manager or I hate him, whatever, like you said. But you get to that game where you go, and we've had every manager post Fergie, we go, no, this, with Louis van Gaal, I think it was Norwich at home. There you go, this isn't the guy. Sorry.
No, sorry. It's hard as well with Ten Hag because do you rate and do you value the decisions and the performances in the first 2 seasons under the Glazers and some silly purchases and, different coaches, different doctors, different medical team, different training ground, like all the things that Ten Hag's first 2 years were? Do you rate every one of those games as, if you talk about logic, if you think of how you view a manager as almost like an experiment and you're looking at the results of that experiment, so if you really want to go scientifically with it, do you value the performances and the results in the seasons where he was under the Glazers directly and under Arnold and Murtaugh directly? Do you value them as highly as the results this season and next season? Because if this is the new United and this is the real Man United and now we're back on track, these results in this season, the progress this year, should almost count for more than the other ones because there were other mitigating circumstances there. So I don't know. I'm sure, like you said, Jay, there'll become a point where you go, actually, something's gone here. It's just not going to happen. But part of me thinks it's almost like not quite a clean slate, of course, but this year feels like a completely new thing to those years. So I think I would give him at least until Christmas before I started saying this isn't going to work. But even maybe beyond that, maybe give him the full year for me.
I agree with you, and I think that's what the thinking is up top of the club. Basically what you've just said. He deserves a chance with this new structure, the first full summer. And one of the reasons why I still rate him is, despite last season's unbelievably poor league form, all the injuries, you still managed to win the cup against, I know it's not your biggest rivals, that's Liverpool, but you still managed to basically do over Guardiola's team at Wembley when they're there countless time, give him a bit of a sort of shoe-in. He still pulled that off. He's got something going for him. He has, a really, and that's kind of why I said it, as I mentioned to you when I talk about after the Liverpool defeat, I was still sort of saying, no, he needs time, but you just... to a certain extent, how much time is enough time? I don't know.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying about a season. I mean, if I wouldn't have any arguments with that, but maybe you two would if he was given the season and you got to January and it was like, we could have finished 10th here. I mean, I don't know.
Of course. I'm
not saying you would do.
No,
I'm exaggerating a little bit.
No, but I get that.
I feel like, following on what you're saying, Joe, I feel like the cups could be a big one if you can get because if you're still in the cups, you might look at it and go, okay. We've won 2 trophies in 2 years. We're still in the Europa League or we're Carabao, whatever. Maybe we don't get Champions League football unless we're in the Europa, but maybe we still win a trophy. If you're out of cup competitions and the league form is bad, then it's different, because then I think one thing that kept us all going a little bit last season was the optimism of we could still win something.
Yeah.
And we did.
Yeah.
I remember people saying you can't sack him while we're still in the cup.
Yeah.
That was almost like you got to at least see if he can win it. We're in the quarters, we just beat Liverpool. Okay, you can't. We've got Coventry next. We're probably going to make the final. I know we almost blew that, but you can't sack him now. You could look when Tottenham sacked Jose. And
I know that was odd. That ahead of the final.
You can't do that. So that almost got him to the end of the year, and then winning it sort of is part of the reason why he's got this year.
I mean, maybe it would never be available, but if you look at maybe United's sort of first 15, right? So your first 11 that takes, and then your next 4 subs. Yeah, we could go through it now if you like, but I think it's pretty good on paper, and it has to prove itself. But we haven't seen it yet because of the injuries. Because Ugarte's, Casemiro has been sort of. Well, he was for sale last January. I mean, a few of them were. They would have listened. You know what I mean? So that has been identified for a long while as that position. Nothing against him personally, all that sort of thing. He's just not the player he was, or within this system, however you want to term it. Been an amazing player. I mean, again, without blowing my own trumpet, I actually did a story about when Ratcliffe came before he became the owner. It was February of last year. He went to the training ground and he actually used the Casemiro signing as an example of why have you signed this guy? Not because he's absolutely awful, but you give him a 5-year deal, whatever. It's 4-year deal.
He's 29 at the time.
Yeah, he's second highest paid player there, marginally behind Rashford. He's about 360 or something. Right? Why have you done that? Because of the age, because of the profile, because he came from Real Madrid. So Ratcliffe, and his sort of operation had sort of identified that side. And so, Ugarte, I really hope, because I'm not sure he was in PSG's team all the time last season, but I really hope he is going to be a massive improvement. And it might just click. But I think it has to click, and then it has to consistently click, for Ten Hag to convince.
I think if you look at the first half against Fulham, where I thought United were very good. You look at the first, up until Liverpool's first goal went in, United had, I think, 65% possession, weren't making many chances, but Liverpool hadn't had any chances either until that point, pretty much. If we can sort of replicate and extend these spells of good play and good pressing and keeping the ball a little bit better, then as the season goes on, like you said, Jay, maybe if we're sort of battling for top 4 in the league and staying in a couple of the cups, you'd hope we'd get through this new Europa League group stage format as well, just because you get more chances to do so. If we can do that, I think we can start to see the difference of Ten Hag and
definitely. He doesn't. It's not like they want him or anyone expects him to transform this United into, say, Ferguson's Rooney, Tevez, Ronaldo United, for example. Yeah, you know what I mean. Overnight, it's just about. Okay, we can see the progress here. Now, you mentioned, it was interesting because I just thought of it as you were saying then, Rashford, for me, it's a shame for Rashford because he's got all the tools. I look at him, I mean, he's just built, I think, to be and he proved it 2 seasons ago, but, I don't think he's had a shot yet in 3 games. Now that'll be partly down to him, but it's partly down to how the team's functioning. So they're looking at all that sort of thing. I mean, how can it happen that a guy who scores, apart from Mbappe, I'm not sure anyone has scored 30 as a winger in Europe. Yeah. You know, the top in a proper league for the last few. You know, I mean, you might be able to pull one out, but it's rare.
I mean, Salah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. But that's the sort of bracket we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking. We're talking about like top players. What has happened there? I know. Hopefully he will kick in to form.
You say as well about like the system, and obviously some of the Rashford sort of seem what's perceived as his effort levels and his numbers and his pressing and stuff seem to be lacklustre, which is on him a little bit. But the fact that I think I saw a stat the other day in the last 53 games. United's goal difference is -1.
I know.
City's and Liverpool's and Arsenal's are all 40, plus 60, plus 90, like something ridiculous. United just don't score any goals. And this, for me, is as big an issue as the defensive leakages, because in the last few games it's been 11 shots, 13 shots, 10 shots that we've conceded, something like that. We're almost down half from last season. We're conceding 20 plus almost every week. So the number of shots and the XG against us is going down, but the output isn't going up. And is that just a personnel thing? Is it Rashford's out of form, therefore we can't score? Or is it the way we're trying to build up the players in the midfield, the system,
I think it's all these things. I mean,
that's a
from
huge issue.
what I see. I mean, who would you at the moment nominate as your star forward, the best player in your forward line in terms of the tools he's got and what he can do? I'd say it's still Rashford.
I think overall it's Rashford. I think currently, in terms of what he's doing,
no, definitely not.
Would be Diallo in terms of just the fact he came on against Liverpool. He looks exciting.
Yeah,
he didn't have his best game against Brighton, but he still got a goal.
Yeah,
he looks like he's up for it. Whereas Garnacho has been a bit up and down this season. Rashford again been a bit up and down. He's created some chances, but not been the Marcus we know. So overall, Marcus, his
the reason why
speaks for itself. But currently, I think
the reason why I asked that is if the player who is recognised having the most talent and has produced the best season of the forwards, in recent, is kind of like not really doing it. That's a major issue because it's sort of like it's a symbol of the team. And again, it's only 3 games, right? Let's not get too carried away. I'm just a bit concerned because he hasn't scored in a sort of a competitive game since March 17th, since the 4-3.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That's a long time for for Rashford. And Garnacho, I was slightly baffled why he left him out at the start of the season. I mean, maybe, Diallo playing very well, fair enough. But I'm just saying, Garnacho's not got going, so there's issues there, and he just everywhere you look, sort of thing. I think I don't know, something's not right, is it? And I don't know whether it is just the fact that bit of a rocky start, injuries, all these things we're discussing, and given the time that they're going to give him to sort of see what he can do, it will sort itself out. It just needs to sort of steady a little bit, just to sort of, I mean, as I'm talking, I'm trying to think of a performance under Ten Hag where I thought, not only have they won, but that was. I mean, there will be ones. I'm not saying it's non-existent, but it's difficult for me to remember.
Last season, I don't think there was any.
Well, there you go. A whole season,
the FA Cup final for me was our best performance this season because we deserved to beat Man City.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think Pep before that had only lost 2 of his 20 finals or something that he'd been in. So it's not. People say, "Oh, City weren't as good as the year before," but Guardiola doesn't lose finals.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I think we were the better team that day.
You were, definitely
to win.
Definitely.
But in terms
I think he knew it as well, Guardiola. He didn't say it, but I think he knew it afterwards.
I think, for me, and I've always said this, the best performance under Ten Hag so far is the 2-0 win at home against Tottenham in his first season.
Couldn't agree
more.
Where
Rashford could have got a hat-trick. We were brilliant. They
good. He pulled off some saves
made
there.
It brilliant. And again, you're struggling to remember it.
Yeah.
Which says it all because
the fact we both, and I was going to say the same one. The atmosphere was great. The performance was great. There was no drama where you thought,
that's what I'm talking about. No drama.
2 years ago. Or not 2 years ago. 18 months ago.
One thing I will say, and you've kind of alluded to this, Jay, as well. When we're asked, because we backed Ten Hag, and some people have given up on him, and I understand that because we finished 8th, and all the 14 defeats, whatever it was. There's a lot of people out there who are like, why? And one thing I always sort of say is, he's seldom had his strongest team. One of the few times he did have almost, if not his strongest team.
Never had his full strongest team.
Right, never. The closest he got to it was the FA Cup final, where we were good and we won. If I'd have seen him with his strongest team and I was seeing what served up, I'd be worried. I'd probably have lost faith. But we never see it. We never see Shaw, Martinez, Yoro or whoever, Delict, Delo, Casemiro, Højlund or whoever, all starting. And I know there's always at least 2 of them out.
It's a little bit like, well, no one ever... But you look at... When I watch Arsenal, every time I watch them, Saliba, Gabriel, Ben White, Saka, Rice... Havertz,
they're all there, aren't they? The keeper,
Odegaard, those 8 are playing every freaking week for them. And you think, like, when's the last time Luke Shaw, Martinez, Mainu, Bruno, Rashford, Højlund, Chuck Dallow in there as well. When's the last time those 7 all started together for 3 games in a row? Has it happened since Ten Hag got there? I honestly don't know if it has.
And again, that goes back to what I reported this morning about they think it's...
So they feel like us.
Well, you know, the view is that it's fair that, you know, it can't really be judged until that happens.
Just on the sort of the ownership and what happened in the summer and keeping Ten Hag, there's obviously 2 sort of... And this was always going to happen, and I'm sure they made provisions for this as well, or sort of at least discussed it. The whole going to search for another manager thing. Yeah. And obviously, when people think about loyalty, whether that be relationships, in jobs, in football, whatever, we look down and we frown upon the idea of, I still want this, but I'm going to see if there's anything better. That isn't something as socially you do, is it? You don't go to your wife, I like you, but I'm going to go...
Just going to have a look and see what...
I'm going to go on...
What's in
just going to do a bit of speed dating, and if there's no one better, I'll stick with you. We don't do that. What do you think they were thinking when they went through that process, making it so public? Do you think they thought, we're going to sack Ten Hag and it won't matter? Or do you think they genuinely believe that this is just pure business, we've got to do what we've got to do? Because that was such a weird thing, and you already see it, Jamie Carragher and these people going, they clearly don't like him because they tried to replace him.
See, just to be fair to them, they didn't make it public. Sort of characters like me did reporting the fact they're doing. But you're right, it was never going to. Doesn't really matter.
They since did say though, didn't they?
Sure, right. Okay, I hear what you're saying.
Decided to look around, and he was the best man for the job.
I mean, again, maybe I'm naively glass half full. I actually thought it strengthened Ten Hag because they'd done all that. Try to consider everyone they could, blah, 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 and actually thought, well, actually, maybe he's the best guy. And I actually thought that was a feather in his cap, but also in theirs, because, again, they were brave enough not to do it. But I hear what you're saying, but I feel it strengthened him in the dressing room as well. I can completely understand the other point of view. If someone says, no, how could it strengthen if players are looking at that thinking, well, they obviously don't fancy him. I mean, you know, again, the sit-down we had with him at UCLA, I actually said to Ten Hag, it's not much, I didn't say these words, but I said, wouldn't you wanted a longer contract, you know, because it's only an extra year. Oh, I don't need that. I said, what about your family security sort of thing? And he sort of like batted it away. But you can understand what I was asking.
No,
it's like... Point. I mean, I think they did that because they probably thought they were going to get rid of him, right? And so therefore they wanted to be prepared. I mean, some of the names he spoke to was interesting. Gary O'Neill, you know. I mean, I'm not saying they were going to.
Very good manager.
You know,
I don't know if he could work at United. But
it feels like that would have been a hard sell.
Coach.
But they consulted a heck of a lot. It was double figures, I'm pretty sure. You know, but I think the FA Cup final changed their mind. Not completely, but I think they just looked at that and then considered it, and then, you know, fed into sort of what they'd found with the people who were interviewing. And it's interesting, Wilcox did all the interviews, right? Because again, Ashworth wasn't in then, right? So Wilcox is quite a interesting stroke, influential person at your club because, not, you know, because he did all that. So he's also... So again, if you're Ten Hag and you know that, I'm wondering how you look at it. You look at it thinking, not thanks a lot, Jason, because he's just doing what he's been asked to do, but you think, you know, you didn't really fancy me. Or you're thinking, actually, you went through all these people and you came back, reported back to sort of, you know, Ratcliffe, whatever. I think we should keep, you know, I think maybe... Yeah. So I am always in life sort of more glass half full, but I actually feel that it made Ineos look good. Or it showed to me that they're actually quite brave and actually quite sensible, because they didn't just do all that and think, oh, we're going to look silly here if we don't sack him, because we've done. But this process has been, you know, you two can quite legitimately have a different point of view about it. That's just kind of how I look at it.
I just wanted to ask you about fan influence, because they're at the games. Wilcox, Brailsford, even Sir Jim Ratcliffe. The fans make their voices heard. Do you think that could influence them? Because at the minute, I feel like Ten Hag still has a lot of backing by a lot of fans. I don't think it's turned against him. And I'm always aware that the presence of Ineos over where the Glazers might not come to Old Trafford for a while.
But you were saying as well, weren't you, at some of the games now, there's a bit more heckling, a bit more booing for certain decisions, substitutions, and people playing and stuff.
Yeah, when Rashford stayed on, for example.
I didn't like that, but there was a booing because basically people wanted to see him come off for instead of Garnacho. Could you see that having an influence?
I think it will. I think they will always. I think that, I don't say it's going to be a massive thing, but I mean, this is just my view. But I wonder if it completely turned against him. I mean, I think if it completely turned against him, I think that would be because the writing was on the wall anyway. Because it's a good crowd in Old Trafford. They don't really do that. Do you know what I mean?
Usually, when you lose the crowd.
That's what I'm kind of saying. It's quite rare, isn't it, at your place? So for that to happen,
I've never seen a manager sort of.
I mean, I do think through all my reporting on them since they sort of came in or started to come in the Ineos sort of football department, I do think they are very considered. I'm not trying to say that means they're amazing or going to be successful. I do think they really do take their time, and I think we have the proof of it with the sort of beauty parade, if you like, of the potential replacement for Ten Hag. But I do think they would take fans. If it was really, really bad into consideration, but I don't think I don't think that would be the defining, or I don't think they would wake up one day really backing Ten Hag. I don't know. Let's say you lose. I mean, it's a freak result anyway. I don't know, 7-0 against Liverpool at home, and everyone's booing. I think they would just take that as a sort of one. I think it has to be a part of a whole picture, and that's, I mean. People like Ashworth and Berardi would always say that any one decision, whether it be a transfer, manager keeping his job or new player contract, is not just one person, it's all of them.
Yeah, because maybe that was... Sorry, I was just going to say, maybe there's a small part of that from the FA Cup win and the fans being so happy. Again,
definitely.
It's not the whole thing of like, well, the fans are cheering at Wembley, so let's keep him. But it might
definitely,
definitely. He has got that feel-good factor at the minute.
You mentioned before about Dan Ashworth, and he wasn't part of the team that decided to keep Ten Hag, and he said that himself in that interview. Do you believe that? Do you believe that his opinion wasn't taken into account?
I have to believe it, Joe. It's kind of why I asked him, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, come on, because he sort of rebutted it or whatever, and I sort of said, oh, how could I maybe put it a slightly different way. There would have to be a way of them knowing, this is the people who were allowed officially to make a decision, kind of what their incoming sporting director thought, just to take that into account. Because, as I basically said to him, he's like, he's always I have to believe I'm going to say that.
Okay. Well, here's what I can say. And my opinion is, I think it's smart for Dan Ashworth to say I had no involvement, because then for two things: one, he can say I had no involvement, but I since have said that I back him and I think it's the right decision. But then if we do have to sack Ten Hag earlier than we wanted to, Dan Ashworth can say, we can maybe just let people know that I was never keen on him anyway, and they made this decision before me. So because it's like a way to save face for United.
Definitely.
If the incoming sporting director likes him and then gets proven wrong, that makes Ashworth look bad. Yeah. If he says I wasn't part of this, so my opinion didn't count, and then he fails, he can go, I never liked him anyway, and get rid. Yeah. I cannot believe that you've got this bloke coming in. We spent all this time trying to get him. He'd been on garden leave for ages at Newcastle, so he wasn't working for them directly. He was working for them, but he wasn't doing work for them. Yeah. That we had no idea what his thoughts on the new manager, the idea of a manager. Like you said, you have to believe that is the case, but that seems so far-fetched to me. No one had to sit down in a cafe with him. He can say what his thoughts on Erik Ten Hag are as Newcastle sporting director. Yeah. I just can't believe. What does Dan Ashworth think? No one knows. He starts in 2 weeks, but we simply cannot speak to him.
What is interesting as well, basically everyone around in Ten Hag, not everyone, but generally has kind of changed apart from him, right? So all his coaches have basically changed, right? Apart from Darren Fletcher, who's in a sort of slightly different role when he's technical director. But and then there's all the structures above him. Again, you could look at that, so he's isolated, but again, I'm not so sure, because what they try to do is kind of what they try to do, which is get an adult structure. Yeah. Revamp the coaching, getting some better players, so that the manager has the best chance of not doing what he did last season, which was kind of bomb with a team which was riven by injuries and all the rest of it. Blah blah blah. It's just this. I think we were joking about it, but United is such a soap opera, and will we be sitting here, us three, hopefully if you ask me back in 2 years' time, and it's, I don't know, it's Gareth Southgate, and you go, oh my goodness me. I know we finished 4th this season, so we've got the Champions League, but the team and money, I don't know, is it going to be
same conversations over and over again? History just repeats itself at Man United, and that's what I'm getting so sick of, is where we think that, I know obviously you have to get the right manager, but do we really think that if Jose Mourinho had taken over from Pep at City, or Louis van Gaal did, or Ten Hag did, or Solskjaer did, none of them would have done well with that City team or that City structure. And yet all of them who've won trophies, except Solskjaer, everywhere they've ever been, they've won trophies. And then they can't really do it at United. Is that a coincidence? Well, I'm going to pretend that's just them.
This is actually really, this squad. I mean, what do you think of the squad now with the new additions? Because it's difficult to know, isn't it? I mean, I've just mentioned there Ugarte. If I'm wrong, I'm really sorry, but I don't think he was a regular for PSG in proper games last season.
I think he played quite a few games. He played like 37 games or something.
I think a lot of them were early on.
Yeah, right. So you might have, it wasn't always.
But what do you think of this squad now? Do you look at this squad? Everyone's fit. Yeah. Where do you think it should finish? You know what I mean? How good is it?
My concern, personally, with the squad is attack-wise. I feel like we're too reliant on erratic players. Where I don't know if Xerxes is going to get the goals we need. I don't know if Højlund is. I don't know if Rashford is.
Yeah.
Garnacho and Diallo, I love them both, but again, are they going to weigh in with the amount of goals that you need to challenge at the very top? That's my big concern. I think when everyone's fit, you've got a really strong team.
But what position is?
I think there's a bit of an unknown sort of.
No,
it's true, because I don't know. Like Højlund kicks on from last season, great, and if he gets 25 goals this season, that answers my question.
But you pinpointed it, Jay. You're right. It's an unknown, and I think they're trying to get beyond this unknown. So again, I think that's why time is. The sort of. The view is let's just wait and
Injuries are so massive. I know that we keep going on about it, but I think because you look at the City squad, it's quite small now. They keep selling players and not replacing them, but they've got 14 fantastic players, and then after that it gets a bit weird really quickly with players who Pep's never going to touch in his life. But they never get injured. I know they have some injuries, but
I know what you're saying,
most of them are just there all the time, ready. Oh, Haaland, do you remember you used to miss a third of every season with injury? You haven't had an injury in the last 3 years. That's cool. Like, whereas at United, no one's consistent, nothing's there. If we get no injuries, I think we've got the 3rd or 4th best squad in the league. I think it's probably behind Liverpool's, like we've seen. I think they've obviously got that energy and momentum. But I think we've got a better squad than Tottenham have.
Yeah,
and
I
think
agree with that.
Liverpool, Arsenal and City have got a better sort of first 11 than we have, definitely.
Yeah.
But after that, I think we can be playing against any of those other people.
What's going to be interesting, because as you mentioned it, is if you have another injury disaster, which really I hope you don't, even though it is the fact, is there going to be a reluctance to mention it? Because there's a whole thing in football, isn't there? You can't use injuries as an excuse. But when you have so many, it's not an excuse, it's just a fact, isn't it? So I just wonder if... the reason why I kind of mention it is they got this guy in from Arsenal, is it Gary O'Driscoll? And that was like sort of September, October of last season. All right, it might need a season, last season to sort of have a look at it structurally. But if it's going to start happening again, does he need to be removed? I'm not sure.
Sometimes it's like it was the set piece coach. Was it Eric Ramsey?
Yeah.
When they brought him in and we kept conceding from set pieces and not scoring from set pieces, and everyone's blaming him. Like, it might not be this guy's fault. He might physically not be able to do anything about it. But it's like the optics of it. It looks like you've come in and everyone's injured all the time. It's your fault. It's your department.
Can be done.
Like, what's going on? Like, it doesn't look great for him. But I don't want to blame it on Gary.
No, I don't either. But I'm just.
This
is where we're at. Is it still?
At some point we have to start blaming the floor and the air and the wind. Like, I don't know, people say you can't make bagels as good as they do in New York because of the water.
It's in the water. Know that, right? Is that right?
Well, yeah, that's what they say, but it's probably nonsense. It's almost like the water at Carrington or the grass, the way the sun hits the floor, it's hitting people's eyes and they're running with. Like, we have to go so deep to have.
I just can't get over the Arsenal game. Like the Arsenal game on pre-season.
Oh yeah.
And then it was like, it's the pitch. I'm like, all right, sound. Arsenal were on that pitch. They're not falling down and being out for months. What's going on? And it's like, all right, you say Yoro was carrying a knock or whatever, but it just feels at times like, I don't know.
It's just bad luck.
Something sinister
bad luck
going on.
It doesn't
the
count.
Cosmos, I can't explain
but that's
it.
kind of what I was wondering about the injuries. Is it going to be like, not for us three or people who've got half a brain, but is it going to be like, oh, you can't mention injury again? You had that excuse. No, it wasn't an excuse last season. It was a fact. 66 injuries, loads. I don't know. I mean, again, maybe Luke Shaw should be sold because if he's injury prone, it's a liability, right? It's not helping you. It's not helping. I know he's a great player and there's nothing against him personally, all that sort of thing. But if you've got players that are consistently injured, that's not helping the team, and it's a hard business.
It's a good point. You remember Van Gaal with his piece of paper because he couldn't remember when he had all those injuries.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
I think he had there was something 13 players out.
That's right. Yes.
You remember? He had to bring a piece of paper with him.
After you'd lost at West Ham, I think. It was the next whole thing. Yeah, I do remember that.
And it was like. That again, had he had all those fit players, maybe it's a different narrative for him. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes managers do lose key players or a lot of players, and that can.
That's why I've always been a little bit baffled about this truism in football that you can't use injury. Even a sort of inverted commas, a relatively. If I know it's about a team game and you should have world-class players in every position, but it's just not practical all the time because these players aren't around, don't exist. There's not so many. But if you have 3 or 4 key injuries, if you flip it on its head, if those players don't matter, why are they your key players in the team?
I've said what's the point? Yeah. If injuries don't matter, why does anyone strive to sign better players than other players?
Exactly.
If everyone is
exactly the same,
if everyone's exactly the same,
it's a really weird truism in football. You're not allowed to mention it. It's like an excuse.
I'm still not over Vidic's injury in 2012. That was worth at least 1 point. Come on.
Definitely worth 1 point.
Do you know what I mean? Let's not kid ourselves. It's been 12 years and I'm still not over it. Jamie, as always, it's been great chatting to you.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed that.
Good fun.
And hopefully a little bit more clear. It feels mad. I was just thinking about the books you've written and was it A Season in the Red under Moyes?
Yes.
It feels like we're back. We're back to that sort of thing again, aren't we? It's there's always this chaos and
when I was doing the Solskjaer biography, anytime while I was writing it live, it wasn't for publication. Anytime he could have been sacked, and that would have. I would have got to pay my money, but it would have killed the book. And I was just thinking, please, I became a United fan, please don't sack this guy. But that was the same sort of precariousness.
You need to start writing him early with United. As soon as he gets to down, start writing that book on him, seriously. Go and check out Jamie's books and his writing at The Guardian, including the article we've been speaking about. You know where to find me and Joe. Big thank you to Green King Sport Pubs, I should say, for sponsoring his podcast. That's been Joe Smith. That's been Jamie Jackson from The Guardian. I'm Jay Motti. This has been Off the Bar. Thanks for watching.